One, I know that we're starting a few minutes late. Apologies for that. Still trying to get a hang of the technology. Instagram Live, sometimes it can be a bit tricky. So, yeah, we have a special guest with us today, Niclette. Niclette is a member of our Africa Policy Conversations community. And we're going to be discussing a very important topic, the conflict in Congo. And some of us, since we've been, hi Niclette, okay, I see you. So I need to figure out how to do the ad now because I'm a bit, okay, I think I see the button. All right. Can you see me? Can you hear me? And for those who are on, thank you so much for joining. Please share this on your stories, let other people join. We'll have questions, we'll make it very interactive. And we'll also save the video as well afterwards. And I hope I know how to do that. So I'm trying to add Niclette, who is our guest. But like I was saying, and thank you so much to the Africa Policy Conversations community. It's not easy to put these things together, and we literally just decided to do this a couple of days ago. I'm sure a lot of you saw the headlines on everything happening in Congo, the ethnic tensions, the colonial legacy, the fact that this country is one of the richest countries in the world, right? But then there's still conflicts. And that's the story of Africa. You have lots and lots of conflict. So it says, okay, I don't know if Niclette, can you send the request? Because I tried to add you and it says that you're unable to join. I'm going to try to send the request again. Niclette, are you there? She said she has already requested. Let me see. Okay, awesome. Awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. I'm excited. And when you join, you can just tell us in the chat box where you're joining from. Hey,
We
hey,
got there in the end.
baby. Happy New
Hi.
Year. I think
Happy New
I think it's the
Year.
first time I'm seeing you this New Year.
It is the
So
first time. It's been an interesting year so far. There's a lot going on in the world.
2025 has actually been, it just started with so much, like across the continent, across the US, across the world.
It's
Lots of conflict.
intense.
Yeah, lots of even natural disasters, the fires in California, the plane crashes. I think sometimes even just turning on the news is just like, yeah, it's heartbreaking sometimes.
It
So,
is.
Nicolette, okay, go ahead. I was just gonna say, I would like you to introduce yourself as well. I'll introduce myself and then we'll just dive into the topic. It's going to be a packed conversation. We're hoping for 30 minutes because we don't want it to be too long. Um, but yeah, so please tell us a little bit about yourself and how are you connected to Congo?
Thank you. Well, you said you wanted to go first, right? Do you want
Okay,
to?
let me go
Yeah.
first. I hope everybody can see me and Nicolette well because I'm just making sure I see a little bit of a shade on my screen,
I can see
but
you
I hope everyone else
clearly.
can see. Okay. All
Hmm.
right. So my name is Chineo Wanaka and I am the convener and co-founder of Africa Policy Conversations. I'm a lawyer. I'm an activist actually because I'm very passionate about justice, equity, nation building, and I love Africa. I'm proud to be African. And one of my life's goals and missions is to make Africa a better place, right? In any way that I can, right? Because I know that Africa is a huge continent, but one of my biggest goals is to be able to leave a mark, right? So I'm going to pause here because I wear many hats and I don't want to take up so much time. So back to you, Nikki. You can tell us a bit about yourself.
Sure. First of all, thank you to Africa Policy Conversations for even creating the platform where we could have these level of discussions. My name is Niclette Mundabi. I'm originally from the DRC, so that's Congo, Kinshasa. There are two Congos, one Brazzaville, one Kinshasa, and I like to say that I'm from the big Congo. I'm from the Congo that takes up a lot of space on the map. Um, I consider myself to be an international business consultant, but the asterisk is that I'm also very social impact driven. And so over the
Why
bulk
we
of my
connect?
career, yeah, over the bulk of my career, I've really focused on Africa related projects and also making Africa great, making Africa great again. And I think this is how Chine and I actually connected many, many years ago. It's because somebody who was a mutual connection actually thought that, we would add a lot of value to each other's lives, and we have. So that's it.
Wow, I've even lost track. But I remember vividly both of us in 2019 running around in New York
Yep.
on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. And I remember I was in America and you hit me up. You were like, "You're in America, you should come to ONGA." And I was like, then I wasn't even, yeah, I knew about ONGA, but I had never attended. And yes, thank you so much, actually, because you've played a critical role in my life. You've also been a firm supporter of the work we do here at Africa Policy Conversations. And it's really
Absolutely.
been a pleasure knowing you. You're someone who I know you already do a lot, but I know that you will do much more. I see you as a
Amen.
leader, as a
Amen.
force, yeah, as a force for the continent and for your
Amen.
country as well. So just break it down for us, right? Imagine I am 5 years old.
Yes.
I don't know anything going on in the Congo or in the DRC. What is the cause or okay, before we talk about what is first of all, what is going on? Right? And then before we
Right.
then talk about what is the cause, what is
Right.
going on? Yeah.
Um, Currently, what is going on is that there is a rebel group that is backed by Rwanda called M23. Um, they we've had a long standing issue with them as a Congolese government because they contribute to a lot of instability in the Eastern Congo region. And what happened last week that has caused all the headlines is that they came into a city, one of the largest cities in the East, 2 million people, a city called Goma, and they took over the whole city, basically. Yep.
So they took over the whole city. And okay, so let's just pick this apart. You just said that they are from Rwanda. I remember watching a CNN interview with President Kagame, who is like a poster child of good governance and leadership on the continent. So for me, it was very heartbreaking to actually see that a country like Rwanda allegedly is involved in this. So and you're not the only one I've spoken to in DRC. A lot of people are very sure that there is a role that, so can you just shed a bit more light on that?
Sure. So I think to kind of share the background as to how Rwanda got involved it's going to require a lot of context of Congo's history, right? So
Mhm.
um, I think at the Berlin conference, when Africa was split up by these colonial masters, uh,
Mhm.
Congo was very unique because Congo, while other countries were considered like colonies of the UK, colonies of, we were actually the private property of the King of Belgium at the time. So we had a very even under colonization, we had a very different experience because we were not considered like an extension of. It was almost like a private property of, and and I think in many ways the trauma of being treated, at the time it was basically like Congolese people being maimed if they weren't being productive, that regime was actually very brutal to Congolese people. And so by the time we got to independence from like in the 1960s, along with a lot of the, many other countries in Africa, by the time we got to the 1960s,
Mhm.
it was a structure of they killed the person who actually led the push for independence, whose name was Patrice Lumumba. They
Yes.
killed him and basically installed or had a lot of influence into how government was run in the Congo since then, right? And it's not always very clear. It's sometimes confusing when you're saying this country is involved. And I think everyone's, especially when it comes to Kagame, the paradox is he's been the shining light or like the example of good leadership in Africa. So a lot of us are kind of heartbroken and almost, you wish it wasn't so. But the truth is that after Lumumba was killed, a president called uh, I'm just going to give you like the shortened version of this. But the president called Mobutu ran the country for 33
Mobutu
years.
Sese
He
Seko. Wow.
Mobutu Sese
We
Seko
all know
was
in
he was
Africa,
basically
Mobutu.
right. He was basically what you'd call a dictator. So he ran the country for
Yep.
33 years until 1997, where his health gave up and he died. And at that point, there was a rebel leader called Laurent Kabila. Laurent Désiré
Mm,
Kabila. He came in, and we usually in Congo we call him Kabila the father. It would be like Kabila père. He came
mm,
in, basically took over government and ran for 3 years, and then he was assassinated. And then the son, who we
mm,
know as Joseph Kabila, took over and basically ran, I think, until when we have the Tshisekedi elected into power. I think that was like 2019 or something like that. And so this is where we find ourselves today. So to explain a little bit of how Rwanda found itself in the Congo, it's through all these transitions. When Mobutu was dying, and then Kabila, the father, was kind of making his way into Congo to claim leadership of the country. This it is what kind of opened the door to Rwanda being involved in some of what was happening, and yeah, and they just infiltrated the country, and I think some of it was and stayed really. And stayed, and like you say, it's ethnic tensions. There's a lot of context. This is really isn't enough time to go through everything, but this is like the rough version of what's happened and what's led us to this point.
Okay, so thank you so much for that. And I want to touch on the issue of governance right now because I know
Yes,
that there are multiple challenges, right?
yes.
There are the ethnic challenges, there's the colonial aspect, which is a critical aspect that a lot of African countries cannot run away from. A lot of our problems can be traced back. And the
Hmm.
fact that move from being a private property of King Leopold
Hmm.
to then becoming almost a private property of these dictators. We
Hmm.
talked about Mobutu, we talked about Kabila. These are people that we have heard of from movies and from documentaries so it's like the exploitation moves hands from those who are foreigners
Right,
and then our own people also who come in there. Some of them even come in as activists.
right,
And then when they get into power, they then become the oppressors.
right.
So let's touch on the issue of governance. Why are we not getting governance right? Because I believe that if if your country had good governance, some of these people will not even be able to infiltrate some of these other
Exactly.
countries. So what is your take on that?
I agree with you in your assessment that if governance was good, that this wouldn't be happening. But I also think, right, and I think this is why context is important. I think the way our countries were liberated all over Africa and the leadership that followed after, a lot of the countries all over the continent were essentially dictatorships or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we sometimes undermine the colonial influence when it comes to how we lead on the continent and how that has basically stayed. And I always say this, I think for us to become successful countries, we're going to have to deconstruct what was left behind, because what was left behind by colonial powers was never meant to prosper us. The leadership
That's
styles,
very
the ideals they
true.
had
Wow.
beyond leadership, it was never meant to prosper us. It was meant to keep us under their control. And I think a lot of leaders that came right after independence basically found a model of leadership that was never meant to prosper them or whatever. So when you see how some of these leaders treated their people, handled governance or whatever, it makes sense because, and not to excuse bad leadership, but it really could be explained by saying that you could only give what you had. And if what you had was a bad example of leadership, then you're just perpetuating the cycle. And I think this is why awareness is so important, right? We need to, I still think Africans need to become very clear and determined about who we are as a people and what it is that we have. I think everybody knows about the American dream. I think every African needs to get clear on what the African dream is. And once we're clear on that, I think our leadership will start reflecting it. Right now, we're trying to move forward with systems that were never meant to prosper us. And so that's what I would say. So I agree with you 100%. The governance is key.
I need to reemphasize some of the points you've made that have really hit me. And the way you put it, you said what was left behind after colonialism was never meant to prosper us. And
Hmm.
so some of our countries, we're running round and round in circles and we're fighting one another, but the structure itself is so flawed fundamentally that
Exactly.
you can barely make progress, right?
Mhm.
And then you said something also about awareness. Why are we having this Instagram live? We could just read about it. Sometimes we read about these things on Western media, and there's even a narrative out there. But we thought that it would be important to bring this to our demographic, which is the younger people. If we want to chart a way forward, we need to understand where we're coming from, right? And
Mhm.
unfortunately, a lot of us do not understand our history.
No,
We don't
we
understand the
don't.
nuances. We don't understand, we know more about the history of the US, the UK, than our own history. And some people
Hmm.
say, like in Nigeria, I know history is not taught in schools. I don't know what it's like in DRC, but we need to really have that knowledge of the complexities before we can actually solve the problems. So
Exactly.
someone asked a question in the chat. Emily Amarachi said that what's your take on the rich resources that Congo has? Could this be contributing to the instability? So we're going to come to the resources. We're going to speak about cobalt, right? Um, Imagine a country that is meant to be, is producing about 70% of the world's cobalt.
Hmm.
And in a normal, I mean, if we're just going by rational, this is supposed to be one of the richest countries in the world.
Hmm.
Even my country, Nigeria, with all the mineral wealth, we still have
It's not as
130
rich.
million people
Yeah.
living in poverty, right?
Hmm.
So, why do you think that the resources that Congo has, why is it contributing so much to the instability?
Right.
Why is it not
Uh,
a blessing? Why has it become a curse, basically?
it's not a blessing because we haven't figured out how to govern over the riches that and I don't know if I can use this, if it's appropriate at this moment. Uh, the talent we each possess will serve us as long as we are good stewards of those talents. So, for instance, you could be blessed with a lot of stuff, right? But you have to have good experience governing the resources that you have. You have to have good sense resourcing it. And I also think that you need to be fair. I think that the again, I'm going to go back to the history. The history of Congo is that it's been led in such an unfair way that even when people come in, they prioritize um, creating as much wealth as possible, maybe sometimes personally, instead of thinking, how can we put this resources, what systems we need to put in place so that this serves the whole nation, right? Because we have a lot of resources, but we're also a very big country. I think we're roughly about 100 million people at the moment. And um, coming up with a system of governance that ensures that we are, and I think this is where the responsibility lies on the Congolese people, right? This is something we're going to have to take ownership over and figure out ways of how we're going to uh, best manage our resources. Because, like I say, I still think the model that we're running on is an old model. The model that we're running on is really a model of exploitation. That's why this has gone on for 30 years. It's gone on for 30 years because they've normalized exploitation of people as part of well, that's just how you get to the minerals. People die, women have to get
Mm,
raped or whatever. And I think somewhere we have normalized that as part of the acquisition of minerals in Congo.
mm.
And so that's why you're kind of seeing this. Did you want me to touch on Amarachi's question, or maybe we'll get on the resources later to answer some of what she was saying? What do I think about
Yeah,
the resources?
yeah.
Yeah,
So I want you to touch on that, but you just
yeah,
made a point about normalizing this dysfunction.
right.
And there's so many things I want to talk about, because there's a role of we the citizens, right?
Hmm.
And the leaders, right? So and then there's also the international community. So you can touch on Amarachi's point and then we bring it home. I really also want to talk about the human rights violation because we're women, the impact
Right,
on women and children. So we'll
right.
take that afterward. But you can touch on the question that Amarachi asked.
If I remember her question correctly, it was that what do I think about the minerals of the Congo and how is it contributing to the instability?
Mm-hmm.
I think that the minerals of Congo belong to the Congolese. That's
Mm-hmm.
one thing I think that Congo needs to make very clear, right? What lies within our borders is ours. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think that we can justify anybody. Like, if I was looking to acquire a Bunny crude oil, or a Bunny light crude oil, I would not be sourcing it from Ghana. I'd have to come to Nigeria because that's who owns it. That's the entity that owns that resource, and then try to figure out
Mm-hmm.
trade fairly with that, with Nigeria. And I think that's the argument we're making, right? The resources are ours, but it's accessible through other markets, and that is how it's basically fueling conflict. Be- because what should be for Congo and Congo alone to sell, people have normalized buying it from a neighbor. And of course, when you
Mm-hmm.
do that, you incentivize the armed groups, and there's like 100 plus, right? There is 100 plus people, armed groups that are in Congo. If you keep buying what they're smuggling out, you are participating in basically fueling the conflict. And so
Mm-hmm.
it may seem like you're not contributing to the problem, but you are. You are, and that is how you're doing it.
Absolutely.
It's that they're being incentivized to have to acquire the minerals in the way that they're acquiring it, which is through a lot of violence, a lot of instability, causing a lot of mass displacement, and it's ending up in a global supply market where everyone can, innovation and technology and like check out
Yeah.
the latest cars, but nobody understands that there is a price being paid that I really feel like is needless and doesn't. We could basically come up with another system, and that's the thing, right? I think sometimes Africans we are like in this funk, and and I've traveled around Africa. I spend a lot of time in Nigeria. I'm always fascinated at how we're constantly trying to mold ourselves and adapt ourselves to the dysfunction instead of saying this is
Mm-hmm.
dysfunctional. Why don't we just implement another system that's not going to be
Mm-hmm.
dysfunctional, right?
Yeah.
And so
I mean,
that's my
the re
frustration with Africa.
hmm No, you're
Yeah,
absolutely right. And we've gotten used to dysfunction. And I think that to solve these problems, we need people who are willing reformers. We need people who are ready to die on the line. If you look at a lot of countries, actually, for a revolution to happen, I mean, if you look at Nelson Mandela, if you look at Gandhi, if you look at a lot of these people, they were selfless and they said, you know what, enough is enough. Even if it meant them being imprisoned or dying, and I think that that brings me to the next point I wanted to ask around the human costs of this conflict.
right,
Because, like you said, people are just used to the fact that, okay, you know what, we need these minerals, we're going to do anything it takes to get them. But there are people being raped, there are people being maimed, there are children that are growing up without, protection. And what do you think can be done about this systematic human rights abuses? And I love something that you said in your article, that this is not just about CSR initiatives. This is not just, slap on the wrist, or do some sort of campaign. How do we solve the root causes?
right. Well, I think that, so to answer your first part of your question, the human cost to this conflict, right? So as I gave a little bit of context as to Congo's history and why that was important in the claims that the government is making today. So since 96, when there's basically been like there's two Congo wars, and if this one, deteriorates any further, it's going to be basically the third Congo war. And since 96, we've basically had like 3 to 6 million people die. And I'm saying 3 to 6 million because different agencies have quoted different numbers. But it's basically too much, right? It's basically one too much, and 3 to 6 million have been killed because of this. Much more have been displaced as part of this ongoing like fight to control the resource trade linkages that kind of move the resources out of the country, and then you've had what Congo has now been known for, has become known for, is the sexual violence against women, right? Because what has happened is that a lot of these rebel groups, and I'm going to say a lot, and by the way, when we're saying that Rwanda is taking, I don't think Rwanda is the sole perpetrator of like problems here, right? But it is a contributor, a major contributor to what's happening in the Congo. Um, and the women have basically suffered, you know. They're the collateral damage that happens when, armed groups are just going around the country, at least one side of the country, and engage in violence against women, violence against children who are being made to pay the price for something they don't even know about. I've done work in the Eastern Congo. A lot of these people are lovely or just trying to get about their day, right? They have no idea about how wealthy that the soil that they're on could actually make them personally. And nor do they really care, I have to say, right?
Mm.
And the people who are doing the violence against them, I think, is what our government is trying to do. Like the way it is being handled right now is flawed. And that's what I say. The system, the economic system around how these minerals are moving
Mm.
are costing
Mm.
not only the Congolese government money, but it's also costing Congolese lives. It's costing us our dignity. It's costing the women. I mean, the type of violence, and I don't want to get on this live and start talking about the level of violence I've had to read about. If anybody's interested, you can read The Power of Women by Dr. Mukwege, who's a Nobel Peace Prize recipient, for the work that he's done on repairing the broken bodies of Congolese women that have been left behind by these rebel groups. And you literally have to read it in like, you can't read it in one sitting. It's just too awful. And even, I consider myself to be quite tough as a person, but I shed tears reading that book, and it's because it shows you just the unimaginable uh, trauma that is being that is being imposed on these people,
Wow.
right? Yeah,
Look at that.
and I think
I
that's the tragedy.
want to bring in a question that came into the comment, which is tied to what you're just saying. And it's from Joker Semo, who says, can you speak about the impact it has had on people directly, psychologically? She said, you talked about a faulty governing frameworks. If this changes, can people sustain it? And really, the psychological trauma and how has this impacted people, especially women and children?
Right. I'm going to start with the psychological trauma first, and then I'll come back to the question about being able to sustain it if governance was changed. Um, I don't want to. I mean, obviously, let's think about this logically, right? Sexual violence in any other part of the world creates trauma. So it would be the same thing that Congolese women would be going through, right? And these are, if you have been a survivor of sexual violence, most of the time, it literally stays with you for the rest of your life. It stays with
Mm.
you. It influences how you live your daily life. It influences how you raise your kids. It influences, who you can be as a wife to your husband. It influences your family life. It influences how you, whether or not you can boldly step out into society and contribute as you should. And think about it, right? So not only the ones that are being killed physically uh, are all, that's obviously awful, an awful fact, but then there's also the death of like your dignity, your confidence, and even your
Mm.
ability to contribute to solving problems in your community, right? But in spite of that, Congolese people continue to be resilient, because a lot of people, I went to Goma last year. I was just in Goma like this time last year, like in January last year. I was in Goma, and I was meeting incredible entrepreneurs who are working in agribusiness, who are working in by transforming waste. Like Goma is actually cleaner than in Kinshasa because of that. Because
Oh.
you have, yeah, entrepreneurship actually thrives in this environment. You have people who are looking to solve their community problems, right? And I think as it should be, because I think a lot of us agree we should be solving our own problems. And it's not that they're not trying. They are trying to solve and live their lives and solve problems. The problem is somebody else can come in, can wake up any morning and come over and take the city over if if they want to. And I think this is like, imagine having to live with like, can you be a fully functioning, fully productive person under these circumstances? And the truth is you cannot. Dr. Mukwege was able to do it, but how many is that in like, out of like millions and millions of people? Right? And
Mm.
he's also only one person. And honestly, I don't even think the burden should be on him and him alone to be repairing the amount of women he's had to repair because of what has been going on over the last 30 years, right? And so he has spoken at the UN. I think he has spoken on pretty much every conceivable platform there is to speak about, like, violence against women, decrying what is happening in Eastern Congo. And I think that is that there's something in his book that I love, and I think it really informs the way that I behave today as a Congolese. He said, whenever people read and like hear about the horrible things that are happening in Congo, they get emotional, they get angry or whatever. And I tell them, your emotions are not going to save people in the Congo, right? It needs to be like informed, intentional action. And that's why vehicles like African
Mm.
Policy Conversation are important, because um, even, and I'll now move to the governance structure if the governance was changed. First of all, good governance and changing of structures takes time, right?
Yeah.
And I genuinely think that a lot of what you see around Africa is that maybe things aren't changing as quickly because we are having a hard time changing, which is natural, which is not even to point a finger and blame. It's just that we're used to one system, and somebody's saying we have to overhaul this whole system that has made certain people very rich.
Yep.
You know what I mean? That has, kept the price of like cobalt at a certain price. We're asking for, you're
Mm.
going to have to deal with the price of cobalt changing. You may be less rich because of this. You may
Mm.
not have the influence and power that you had to wield in the past because of this, whatever. A lot of people resist change. So I just want to show you, it's not that,
Mm.
why don't you just change the system or whatever? A lot goes into actually
Mm.
changing a system, right? Even in a corporate environment, a lot of why, like, you have change management consultants is because they understand psychologically we resist change. As for as much as we require change and request the change, we also resist change when it's
Mm.
time to make the change. And so it's like just keeping that in mind, and again, not excusing why the change isn't happening as quickly as we'd like to see it happen, but maybe explaining why it's going to take some time and the right mind frame and the correct frameworks to implement like change in a way that is sustainable.
Thank you for that. And we have two more questions that I want to get to, and I really want us to tie up this conversation with recommendations, right? And because we know what the problems are, but we believe that we're a generation that can make a difference, right? Sometimes when we do this advocacy, people always say, why, it's just, we're talking about stuff, and people are very pessimistic, but we believe that in every generation, people are called, and I
Absolutely.
believe you're one of those people,
Yeah.
and I am one of those people as well. And I'm sure people who are also tuning in are also one of those people who are like, you know what, we're tired of the status quo. We're going to make noise. We're going to do something, whatever if it means writing an article, if it means getting on a live, if it means, because you don't know who is tuning in. You don't know who is inspired to
Right.
take action. And I think we just need to not, get comfortable with the status quo, because
Right.
sometimes there's this learned helplessness, hopelessness. People just believe, oh, there's nothing we can do, and then but there is something you can do. So let's take the two questions, and one of the questions, or actually two of the questions that are from Umami.
Mm-hmm.
Umami is a good friend of mine from Morocco.
Okay.
She's in politics, right? She's
Hi,
a government official,
Mami. Yes.
a young government official in the city of Casablanca.
Right.
And the reason why I'm even happy that Umami and the likes of her are on this call is that these are people who have taken a bold stance to get involved, to
Right.
run for office,
Right.
to go to those terrains where people think that it's not possible. And I think that there's so much we can learn from each other in different African countries. There's so much we can learn to motivate and inspire each other to make change. Because I always say change is hard and no one can do it alone. So I'll
Mm-hmm.
ask the question. Umami says Congolese government should have enough dollars, I guess, money to reinforce its military to face this conflict. It's frustrating to see Congolese military dying because of not having enough equipment and all that. So that's a comment.
Mm.
Um, I want to say, I think I saw another question that she had asked earlier. Okay, she said, why is the Congolese government asking the international community to intervene when its job is to protect its citizens and borders? So now the question about the government, why is the government not playing its role in protecting its citizens? When you're done with that answer, I want us to talk about the big tech companies, because they are
Mm.
also a critical stakeholder group. And then
Mhm.
finally, I now want us to bring in the international organizations like the UN and all that, their failures and what can we do. So three questions are coming to you back to back. But let's start with Umami's own. Why is the government not doing enough to protect its citizens?
First of all, I agree with Umami's points that any government over any country, part of your core responsibility is to be able to defend your people and defend your borders whenever issues arise. Um, as I explained with the context of how we got to where we got, I think that I would say that we are a country that's infiltrated, if that can make sense. We are a country that's infiltrated. I think we are a country that is under a lot of foreign influence. And I think that foreign influence is not for our best, obviously not for our best outcome. Um, I think our country has a lot of people benefiting from it who are unwilling to change. And like I say, don't just look at the numbers and feel sad for Congo. This conflict is making people very rich. They might be
So
sitting
is it making
like,
people in the government? So I understand the external
of course.
factors. The people in the
No, of course.
government
When
that
I'm
is
saying
that
it's making people
okay.
very rich, I think it's making people like, when I say global, when people are globally complicit, it includes the government. It's not excluding that
Mm,
there's a responsibility that the government isn't. No, I think, however, right, and that's the thing. Congo's problems are very complex. You cannot point to one person and and have that person or entity be the sole reason why this is happening. This is very complex. It's multifaceted. It has several stakeholders involved in what we're seeing today, right?
yeah.
And so, yes, a key component of it is making sure that the government is right. If you ask me to answer why they're not getting it right, I would I would say it's probably not for not trying, if that makes sense, right?
You believe that
But
the government is trying its
I,
best.
I think the government is trying its best. The best obviously is falling short at the moment of protecting its people, right? And like I say, as a Congolese, we can only hope and pray they get it right, right? Because it's in
Mm,
our interest and the interest of our citizens that they do get it right. Um, I see that personally. I also believe that you need more women in politics, right? You need more senses, and I think this
I think
dictator
there'll be less
model,
wars. There'll
yeah,
be less wars if we have more women.
I also think the dictator model in Africa makes it so that people can't be honest with leaders. So you can be an advisor to the president, but it sounds like when you get to the room, you're almost like telling him what he wants to hear and what he not what he needs to hear. I think that there is no way a country as big and as rich as Congo, the number one item on the agenda should always be security.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It should
Yep.
always be security. There should be a budget allocated to our um, defense strategies. We should have, like, as rich as we are, because like I say, if you are that wealthy, you're not just going to like leave your house empty for anyone to just come in and take and plunder and take what they want and leave, right? So obviously getting defense right is something that I think the government needs to prioritize.
Yeah.
They definitely need to invest a lot more money into our
In
army. And
security.
I think that once we see that bold decision taken in that direction, I think we should start seeing at least Congo's ability to defend itself improve, right?
Okay.
I saw a comment about why Congo was wanting the world to understand what was happening. I think also that when you're going through something as traumatic as what my country is going through right now, right? Even if I haven't physically, I grew up in South Africa, even if I haven't physically lived in Congo my whole life, I'm traumatized just by the image of seeing your own people suffer that way, right? And it's needlessly. They're suffering more than they have to. Um, and yeah, it reflects that there are definitely areas of weakness for the government. There are definitely areas that they need to be focusing on, and I think they're coming around to that. They're coming around to understanding the importance of being able to defend yourself so that
Yeah.
situations like what happened with the siege of Goma don't happen, on a regular basis.
Yeah. So we have about 10 minutes to wrap
Right.
up this conversation, and I really want us to pivot to the issue of the big tech companies.
Right.
Explain to me, like I don't know, what role do the likes of the Apples and the people who make the smartphones, how are they complicit or how are they to how, what role do they play in all this?
Right. So first of all, I want to highlight that Congo has always been a very strategic contributor to technology
Okay.
and innovation, right? So because I don't know if you even know, the bomb that the U.S. dropped in Hiroshima had uranium that was mined in Congo.
Wow.
Uranium, yes, it was mined in Congo and Canada. So, in a way, our role has always been supplier of minerals, right? That others then use to transform, refine, and then kind of innovate with it, right? So that's something I think we need to work on. So I think when you understand that and the technological advancements that are happening at such a fast pace here in the West or in other parts of the world, you understand the role they are playing. Like I said it before, Congo's minerals should be Congo's to sell. I don't understand why our minerals, anybody is buying Congolese minerals in a Rwandan market. It doesn't make sense, right? And so I think what needs to happen is a lot of these major companies who probably don't want to deal with the headache of coming into Congo and buying the minerals directly
Oh, I
from
see.
Congo, right? Because what Rwanda has done right, what Kagame has done right, is that he has created an environment that people can come and do business in. They can come and do
Yeah.
business quite easily, right? So, whereas I think what we're still trying to work out is how do we create a stable environment for partners, investors, buyers of any mineral, whether it's in like, raw materials or whatever, to come in and to be able to buy from us. I think that's what we need to work out as a Congolese people. Outside of security, I think we need to focus on creating an environment where people can do business and do it quite easily, right?
Yeah.
Because
There's
that
another
is
really
what Kagame has done right.
Yeah.
That's what he's
So
been
I
able to
hear you
establish.
that
So I
one of
think
the solutions is improving the business environment in DRC. Okay,
absolutely.
so I want us to take some of the other questions we're getting as well.
Okay.
So there's a question here, and I wanted us to talk about the multilaterals. So someone actually asked about the AU, and
Right.
it's a good question, good way to also combine the question I asked.
Right.
Um, most of this United Nations and all these big organizations are supposed to be there, to support with world peace, collaboration. Why have, especially the African Union, why have they failed? And whose role is it to solve these problems? Even if a country is imploding, whose role is it and why are they failing in that role?
Uh, I think this is where our culture is important, right? Because as a Congolese, I'll tell you, given our complex and traumatic history, entities such as the UN and the EU and all these international bodies haven't really stepped in to help per se, right? Or even if they've come in to help, it's been ineffective
Mhm.
in actually stemming some of what we're seeing, right? So I think that should make us as Africans go, okay, need like take ownership and lead in this whole process of actually solving your own problem,
Mhm.
right? So I think that Congolese tend to be very wary of any international bodies coming in to try and say, quote, help the situation, because we just don't. We've seen the results, and it hasn't been as effective as we would want it to be,
Okay, so but
right?
beyond the international, what about the African Union
The
or
African
the
Union,
regional community, economic, so like the ECOWAS, the one for
yes,
yeah. So is it that sorry, there's ECOWAS, there's I'm
I
trying to
think
remember the one for
there's the
yeah,
Eastern Africa,
yeah, there's East and South Africa. Can
yeah,
someone put it in
SADC and
the yes. So I mean, why are those blocks not coming together to say, okay, this is one of ours, let's do something about this, let's be our brothers keepers?
right. So I think, and I do want to shout out, currently in this conflict, we are being supported by South Africa that have
Okay,
come in.
that's
But
good.
I would also say
The commencer, thank you for that.
Chile.
Commencer, that's what I was looking for. Yeah. Well, go
I
ahead.
would also say that, we are essentially in a world that's driven by interest, right? So, and this is something I think different governments need to think about. As we're coming together in the AU, I think we shouldn't just put ourselves in spaces where we're just talking and then not backing it up, right? So with the AU, what I would say is, I think it's maybe early days. I think they're trying to figure out right? How to best support it. And I also think that the issue is very complex, and like it involves multiple stakeholders. And really, how do you, you know what I mean? Like, how do you even start uh, being the intermediary to solve something so complex? This is where, again,
Mm.
like I said, the opportunity for the Congolese government to step up and propose solutions, bring something to the table that others can see it, work around, and make sure that it actually works out for everyone. But as a Congolese, I have to say, I don't hold the position that anybody else has to come save Congo. I hold the
Mm.
position that the government the government needs to take ownership and lead on this matter, right?
Mm.
And if we're able to get partners who align with us and who should align with us, because I don't think anybody in Africa believes another country should be treated unfairly, right? But
Mm-hmm.
that's what's happening in the case of Congo. The case of
Yeah.
Congo is, and this is maybe why we're very vocal about it internationally. It's because what's happening is essentially unfair on so many levels, right? And it's causing huge amounts of implications.
Yeah, no, I really agree with you. And we have about 4 minutes left, and I want us to start taking some of our closing thoughts on this.
Yeah,
So I see that there's the BRICS rising, and there are all these other movements happening. A shift away from the US. Even the US itself is trying to focus on America first. So what can we do? I know that, most times we feel powerless and we always say government needs to do something, but governments are usually a representation of the people. They're product work. They always say we get the leaders that we deserve. And I always say that we're all leaders in our spheres of influence.
hmm
Nelson Mandela was only became a leader, like a political leader after decades of his activism, right? And as an organization, we want to be able to also train and equip the next generation of leaders because we believe that one of the biggest challenges on the continent is leadership.
right,
We have the natural resources, we have the human resources, we have everything it takes, but for some reason, and because of some of the things we talked about, the colonial history, a lot of the influence from other people, we've not gotten it right. So what can the young people on this call do? What can people like you and I do? How can we get that critical mass of change agents who are speaking truth to power, who are
right.
active citizens, who are saying, enough is enough? Um, what do you think can be done in that regard?
So I think as consumers, right, we can spread awareness, first of all, to consumers who are buying some of these products, and to raise awareness of what it's under the current system of mineral extraction in the Congo, how it's being done and how that's impacting lives. I think the awareness needs to be there. I think the awareness around how people are contributing to the contributing factors to this issue are is also important. I think people need to understand what role Rwanda is playing in Congo. I think they need to understand how the government is, like trying to address it, or where it's falling short and where it needs to develop itself, like strengths in the way it's addressing these issues. I think people need to understand what the international community is, how they're contributing or not contributing, and even the multinational corporations, right? And because we can demand. I know the Congolese government was suing Apple by saying that Apple was buying conflict minerals or whatever, but we can demand, like as consumers, that the minerals that go into the phones and the devices that we have at home be clean minerals, just like we did with like diamonds.
Mm,
A lot, many years ago with Sierra Leone, where it was basically we pushed for a transparent supply chain, right? So this is what we can do as consumers. You can start voicing the need for I guess extractive minerals from the Congo that go into like the technology devices, whatever. We can demand for that as consumers to be clean. We can demand for that from the people that we are buying these devices from. We can
mm,
also raise awareness for those who don't know, as I just mentioned. And I also think that we can through platforms like this, we can demand for better governance. Like I say, there are key issues happening here in Congo, but I think that the economic structure around the way the minerals are being sold is the problem, right? I think if we can find ways to actually limit uh, people buying Congolese minerals in other countries instead of coming to buy directly from Congo, I think this will start it will remove incentives for people to keep continuing the violence and doing it in the way that they're currently doing it. Hi, David. um,
Yeah.
so I think that's one of the things. And also, yeah, demand better governance. I think at any given day, we as a people, whether it's in Congo and from the African Union, we can
Mm.
say, why is this happening? And what are you doing to address it? Sorry, I'm laughing at Maria with our government. She's Congolese, and I like I say, people think we don't point the finger at our government. We are like the biggest critics of our government, right? But this is, I don't think this is the space for
But
that. I think
but
this is the
yeah,
space
this is not
for
the space for
yeah.
that. And Nicolette, some of you and Maria need to get into government. I think that at some point advocacy is great, but we need more people to go in there and implement these policies and say enough is
Absolutely.
enough. We need people to because I feel like this blessing can be restructured. I
Right.
want to give you a quick example. The Dangote refinery in Nigeria.
Absolutely.
When
Yeah.
Dangote tried to push for the refinery, he was being fought by everybody,
Hmm.
right? Even the European refineries, they're all out of business. Even till date, everything is still, because a lot of these Western countries also like the fact that we depend on them. They rely on
Right.
our market price. They
Right.
want us to be, and the poverty, so they exploit, and then our people remain poor
Hmm.
and have this poverty mindset. But how can we make our people understand that they're not poor, actually? They have everything that the world needs. They're talking
Right.
about the Lobito corridor now. They're trying to
Yeah.
get critical minerals for renewable green energy transition.
Right.
Everything is in Africa. But
Yeah.
how do we get our citizens, our leaders? Because a lot of our leaders still feel like they still have that neo-colonial mindset. They
Right.
still see themselves as subpar. How do
Right.
we, and so that's why I believe in our own generation, because I feel like the older generation, their mindset isn't, it's the Gen Zs and the, millennials and Gen Alphas and the rest of them who would actually have that confidence, hopefully, to be able to make this difference. But yeah, go
It
ahead, please.
it's not only having the confidence, it's having the understanding
Very important.
and the understanding of the context and the understanding of
Mhm.
the history, right? So
Absolutely.
I think today a lot of things are going trendy, and I as a Congolese, I'm happy to see people are asking questions, right? More people are
Mhm.
asking questions this year,
Mhm.
like what's going on in the Congo, right? But I
Yeah.
also think that it's up to people like me, and I'm naturally a very private person. I like to do my business in the background and live my life quietly or whatever. But I've also realized, and this is like when you were saying what can we do, well, I'm also being the change I want to see in ensuring that I
Absolutely.
can actually amplify my voice,
I love that.
um, to start raising awareness around what is actually happening, right? And how we can
Mm.
possibly, and I may not have all the solutions, but I know that, you know what,
Mm.
Chile is very interested in how policy can be developed to, further our economies and our governance, whatever, in Africa. I'm gonna speak with her. Remember when you said we should do this call? I said sure,
I'm
right? Because
so
we
glad you
can't
did.
claim that we want to fix Africa and then when the opportunities come, we are not taking it, or we are not being taking the initiative to lead some of these conversations of what needs to happen. And in terms of awareness, I think this is where education is super important. I support education. I'm
Yeah,
super passionate about
absolutely.
books, and this is why. This is why
Yes.
it's not that just get your education, like your information from a book, but it's more be curious. Be curious about what's happening in the world.
Mm.
Be curious about how you can develop yourself to contribute to the problem solving aspect of how we as
Mm.
Africans show up to the table, right? Be curious about, well, this is not fair. Why is it not fair? How can we make it fairer? Like ask the right questions. Why is it not fair? Why is this happening? Who is contributing to this or whatever? I think you can just personally, if we can start taking agency over some of these issues and not thinking that, like you say, ultimately it also can just be a problem for the government to solve, right? We also need
Mm.
to be informed consumers when we're buying things or whatever. We need to understand what's going into this, whatever.
Yeah.
I remember at some points I even got tired of trying to like acquire like diamonds and jewelry. I just started buying the ones they made in the lab, right? Because I was just like, at least I'm 100% sure nobody died over this or whatever. And I
Yeah.
think it really does start to shape how you behave as a consumer once you become more aware of what is happening in the world, And so
Mm.
I think that's one of the things that we can do, having conversation. And also, Chine, you and I know that. Um, as we're moving around different spaces, make sure that you're amplifying Africa's narrative,
Yep.
in these different spaces. Make sure you're amplifying um, uh, urgent items on the agenda
Mm,
for us as
mm,
a continent, right? Because I think what I've seen over the years is a lot of us as Africans are now sitting at tables of influence. And I think
absolutely.
sometimes we're so happy to be there. We're not even focusing, we're not coming with our list of agenda items
Absolutely.
as to what people need to understand, right? Because
Absolutely.
we're just so happy to be in the room.
I
And I
love it.
think that this generation needs to get past being in the room and go, you
Yep.
know what, about what's happening in the Congo, what are we going to do or say about this, whatever, right?
Mm, I
Because
love it.
we're too casual. I think we're too
Mm,
casual. We don't want to rock the boat. And I'll say this as a young African leader that has lived in the world, lived in several countries, worked in several countries. Um, that maybe is an element of privilege, but I've also realized part of my privilege is removing from myself from rooms that are not going to help me in the goals I'm trying to achieve
absolutely.
in terms of what where my priorities are for my continent, right?
Mm,
I think
mm,
as you move around the world, make sure you're aligning yourself with the right partners, people who actually do want to see change in Africa. Because as we just said, a lot of people are contributing to this, right? A lot of people
absolutely.
who we would look up to if we heard their names and titles and where they work, we would look up to
True.
them and be like, wow, I was in the room with this person and what a big privilege, right? But I think moving into these rooms with more intentionality, we need to be intentional about what we're doing in these rooms. We need to be intentional about how we are voicing our concerns, our priorities. And yeah, we matter. I also think that another thing about why Congo is being so vocal is a way of saying we matter. This is happening. This shouldn't be
Absolutely.
happening. And we matter. Like, this needs to, like, global attention, right? And
Absolutely.
so those of us who have access to different like rooms or whatever, I think let's keep that at the back of our minds. Let's not just show up
Absolutely.
in rooms and and be counted among, but let's make sure that we're actually raising our voices for the things that matter for
That's
us as a continent.
beautiful. That's beautiful. I'd like to bring this conversation to a close, but I want to make two very important points. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing. A couple of people have been requesting to join the live video. I don't know if, I don't know what they want to say. I don't know if they want to ask questions.
No,
But
maybe we can take one. I
okay,
don't
let me
know.
just see if, I don't know. I don't know. Let me see if I'm not really sure how to do this, but yeah, while we're at it, I wanted to really, really thank you for using your voice
Mhm.
um, to amplify this, and also want to pledge to. Wait, is did he join? Did somebody join?
Yeah, I think there's someone on there. I can't see his name.
Okay, Uche, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, you requested, so we wanted to give you like 2 minutes to make your contribution. Can you still hear us?
So, 2 minutes to do what?
You requested to join the live. I thought you had a question or a comment.
Oh, no, sorry. Sorry, my mistake.
Oh,
Oh, okay. Okay.
that was a
Continue,
mistake.
Okay.
please.
So I guess you're just okay. I guess you were just and I don't even know how to turn it off. But yeah, so I wanted to make
Oh, okay, I'll find the way. Sorry.
okay,
All right.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, it's good to have you on the call anyways. Two things that we're going to commit to as AFPC, Africa Policy Conversations. We're launching we have an incoming cohort of interns,
Hmm.
and these interns are from all over Africa. They're
Wonderful.
part of our Leaders Academy, Future Leaders Academy, and they're going to be working on real life policy problems across the continent.
Hmm.
So Umami is also working with us for Morocco. We're working with them in South Africa, in Nigeria. So we're going to make Congo one of our thematic areas of focus, right?
Oh, that's
And
wonderful.
we're pledging to have a group of interns. We also have some interns also coming from the University of London, so as master students in international relations. So, I mean, even if we cannot physically be there,
Right.
to make change, we can have people thinking through, doing research, gathering data, and we hope to work with you, Nicolette, to just see some some policy recommendations, even if it's just to
Absolutely.
mainstream it, to say that okay, we've looked at it, because there's something about also having a fresh pair of eyes, because there's
Right.
going to be a group of people from different African countries. Some of them, I'm going to look through. I don't know if we have any applicants from DRC, but I'll look through. I know we have people from Zambia, from South Africa, from Kenya, from
Hmm.
all these different countries. And so the whole idea is to really think through from an innovative way, because sometimes you just need to look at an old problem with a fresh pair of eyes and new perspectives and bring innovation into it. So
Right.
we're going to commit to having a cohort work on this crisis, look at some of the historical issues, just look at ways, right, inroads, because I don't think it's something, obviously, it's not something you can solve overnight, but there can be some ways to move the needle. So
Absolutely.
that's something that we're committing to on this call, and we hope to be able to, work with you to
Absolutely.
make the right noise, and make some recommendations as to solutions. Yeah.
Mhm. Absolutely. No, I applaud that effort. I think that at the end of the day, a lot of people have always looked at Africa as a country. Like I
Hmm.
say, I am happy to see people are asking questions. People who are not Congolese are curious about what's happening and why it's happening. And who are even like recommending, like, well, what's the government doing? Well, how can we do this? Well, maybe we can implement this framework. I think
Hmm.
that's important. And I also think that yes, let's, when we set these tables with these interns or whatever, let's make sure that, everyone's ideas can be heard, but also it shouldn't end there. I think, things like publishing the research, publishing the data that you come up with, publishing important
Absolutely.
learnings, whatever, that is also key,
Yep.
right? And then in today's world, it's easier more than ever before to translate these things to French, because remember, you're dealing with a country
Mm.
where English can be a language barrier, and sometimes that's why Congolese maybe can't participate at the level they would like to participate in, because there
Ah,
is also the language barrier that,
love
like,
that.
and so these are just some things to keep in mind, but I definitely
Love that.
applaud the effort and will also support it wherever I can,
Yeah, for
so
sure.
yeah, absolutely.
So, yes, thank you so much, everyone, for joining this conversation. Thank you, Niclette, for sharing. We're praying for DRC. We're praying for the situation. We believe that Africa is indeed rising.
Hmm.
This continent has everything it takes, but we all need to work together. We can't be in silos. And those of us who carry light, those of us who are here to make a difference, we need to amplify that voice so that we can also attract others. That's the thing about light. When you bring it into a place where there's darkness, it takes away, even if it's a little bit of light. So I think those of us that carry light cannot shy away. We need to show up. We need to keep advocating, and we need to recruit more people and
Absolutely.
influence more people
Yeah.
in these different spheres. So it's been a pleasure interviewing you. I need to save this video so that those who couldn't join can listen to the playback. So yeah, thank you everyone, and enjoy the rest of your evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you. I don't
Thank
even
you.
know how to turn this off.
Thank you, Sinead. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right
All right.
then.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Hey.